Welcome back to the GSMC College Football Podcast, presented to you by the GSMC Podcast Network on this Wednesday, May 21st. Gonna finish off the show today by continuing on with my SEC rankings. We got teams 4, 5, 6 today. Gonna start at 6, and I think it's the Ole Miss Rebels. Now, I can certainly see the argument that other programs should be ranked ahead of Ole Miss right now. And that's fair. Ole Miss is losing a lot. After a year in 2024 in which the Rebels went all in on getting as much talent from the portal as they could, that collection of talent on that roster, I think was probably a top 3 roster in terms of actual talent last year for Ole Miss. Just self-inflicted mistakes. An avoidable loss at home against Kentucky, a loss at LSU in which they should have won that game. They were leading for the vast majority of it. And also a loss right at the end of the season to Florida, and a game in which they were in prime position to get to the college football playoff to earn one of those bids. But it all fell apart, and they lost. They did not go all in. They did not win last year. It's going to be interesting. After kind of going all in and losing a ton of those guys, there's certainly a lot of row for kind of a loss at Ole Miss. Replacing Jackson Dart, not going to be easy. Kind of a program legend at this point. Set a bunch of passing records for Ole Miss. Ole Miss first-round quarterback since Eli Manning, guy that got drafted to the Giants as well. But Ole Miss is really high on Austin Simmons. If you want, go check out my video where I kind of did a deep dive on Austin Simmons. This is a really intriguing quarterback. 19 years old, already graduated from college, 6'4", left-handed, really smooth operator, incredibly intelligent. This is a guy that Ole Miss, Lane Kiffin, really likes. They've kind of been anchoring him as the quarterback of the future for the past 2 years now. But pretty much everything around him is kind of a question mark. Wide receiver, you're losing Trey Harris, you're losing Juice Wells, and Jordan Watkins, your top 3 wide receivers from last year. Caden Lee's coming back, that's a big bonus. But pretty much everybody else in that room is new. You have Deshaun Stribling coming in from Oklahoma State. He's expected to kind of play a major role. Harrison Wallace coming in from Penn State could be a guy that also factors in there. Caleb Cunningham, 5-star wide receiver freshman. Could he potentially get reps as well? I wouldn't count it out. Running back, also kind of a question mark. They let Quinshon Judkins go to Ohio State for 2024, and it showed in the running game. Kind of struggled. And this is a position that's also going to be losing Ulysses Dew Bentley. So Logan Diggs kind of sounds like he's going to take over after a torn ACL. This is a guy that's bounced around. Started at Notre Dame, had a couple really good seasons there. Went to LSU for a year, didn't play a ton. Went to Ole Miss last year, tore his ACL, but he's healthy. Should kind of be the number 1 back this year. But after that, not really sure. Defensively, they have a lot of question marks, especially on the D-line. You're losing pretty much every starting defensive lineman. Princely Umamilan, Jared Ivey, Walter Nolan, J.J. Big East, all gone to the NFL. At linebacker, Pupal Jr. is gone, and Trey Amos is gone at cornerback. This is Lane Kiffin. They brought in a ton of guys in the portal. It's going to be interesting. Princewell Umamilan, Princely's younger brother, transferred in from Nebraska, a guy that should be one of those key edge rushers for Ole Miss. Son Taron Perkins at linebacker kind of might play more of a hybrid role. He's kind of a Micah Parsons type of player. He's a really big prospect to keep an eye on for this year. Can he step into kind of an All-American type role for Ole Miss? That's always kind of been the expectation for Perkins to get there eventually. But this is a team that still has a lot of talent. Daquan Wright at tight end is going to make a big difference. I think some of these transfers are going to fill holes. And Lane Kiffin is still the head coach for Ole Miss. This is a guy that, love him or hate him, he wins football games. I would be surprised to see Ole Miss win less than 8 games. I think they're probably an 8-9 win team this year. And I think 6 is right around where they're going to end up when the season's done, when we kind of see how those final SEC rankings shake out. I think 6, right around there, is probably a pretty fair estimate for Ole Miss. Now, number 5, I think it's South Carolina. And if you've watched any of my show, you know I'm a really big fan of South Carolina, but I think 5 is probably a fair spot for them right now. They're kind of a trendy offseason pick right now, especially because of the emergence of LaNorris Sellers. This is a guy that's going to be one of the best dual threat quarterbacks in the country, one of the most physically gifted quarterbacks throughout the entire nation, a guy that can run for 150 yards, pass for 300 any given weekend. I really like him, and I think he's going to carry this South Carolina team. Yes, they did lose a good chunk. Wide receiver, running back, kind of iffy. Nick Harbor, who I talked about earlier, he's going to be a big question mark here. Can he put everything together? Can he utilize all those physical traits to showcase what he could do on a football field? That's a really intriguing question for South Carolina this year. I think if Nick Harbor puts kind of everything together, suddenly those questions don't seem as big for South Carolina in terms of playmakers. They're also going to have to kind of shuffle their secondary around a little bit. Lost Nick Imamori, lost a couple cornerbacks, and there's going to be much more of a focus on Dylan Stewart after Kyle Kennard, his departure to the NFL. But Dylan Stewart, freak, absolute freak. 5-star, played really strong as a freshman last year. He'll have a full offseason to kind of develop as that number 1 pass rusher. I think he's going to have a great year. And I think anytime you have kind of that dominant pass rusher, especially in the SEC, that makes a big difference for your defense. If Dylan Stewart can go out and have 10, 12 sacks this year, that's going to be a big bonus for South Carolina. And they're going to be a tough team to beat. I think they're going to be plucky. I think they're going to win a couple games that they might not be supposed to be in. But they're going to be plucky. This is going to be an interesting team. Now, at 4, I have LSU. I didn't know where to put LSU, honestly. Is this the year that they finally break through under Brian Kelly? During his tenure there, they haven't won more than 10 games in the season. That's despite having Jaden Daniels behind center in 2023. That's despite having Garrett Nussmeier throw for 4,000 yards last year. And Brian Kelly also hasn't won a Week 1 matchup in his 3 years in Baton Rouge. That's going to be really interesting, too, this year. They have Clemson in the opener this season. If they start 0-1, that's going to be rough for LSU. They avoid Georgia and Texas on this year's schedule, so they have an opportunity to make a run. Brian Kelly and his staff, they went all in this offseason. They had the top class in 24/7's transfer portal rankings, top 2 or 3 class in pretty much every transfer rankings across the nation, across multiple sources, multiple sites. And you also have a lot of impact guys coming back. Garrett Nussmeier at quarterback coming back is going to be a big bonus there. The guy that led the SEC in passing last year could be even better this year. Caden Durham, running back, really handled business last year as a true freshman. Had 750 rushing yards, 6 touchdowns. Also had 260 receiving yards last year. He's going to be even better as a sophomore coming in, having more strength, having more experience. Going to be a really intriguing running back. Wide receiver room. Aaron Anderson's back after being their most productive wide receiver last year. Had almost 800 receiving yards. Then you pair that with Barrion Brown coming in from Kentucky, a guy that's had over 1,500 career receiving yards, over 120 catches in his career. Also has led the SEC during his time in kick return touchdowns. So you have a guy that's really dynamic in special teams as well. And then Nick Anderson coming in from Oklahoma, a guy that has star potential written all over him. Set the Oklahoma freshman record for touchdown receptions with 10 in 2023. Had 798 receiving yards as a freshman in 2023. Can he get back to that level this year? Offensive line is going to be interesting. They have to replace 4 starters, so how that rotation is going to kind of work out, I think that's going to be something intriguing to watch for LSU. I would expect Tyree Adams to kind of take over that left tackle role. It seems as if that's been the guy there, taking over for Will Campbell. Josh Thompson, a guy that's going to be interesting. I think he's going to get playing time for sure on that offensive line. I don't know if he starts right away, but you turn on his tape against Michigan. That's a guy that went up against a top 5 pick in Mason Graham, top 15 pick in Kenneth Grant, and had no issues with that O-line, or with that D-line. So that kind of showcases his high upside potential. And then the defense, they're going to have to be way better, but there's certainly room for that improvement this year. You have Whit Weeks, Devon Keys coming back at linebacker. That's some nice continuity there. Then you bring in a guy in Jakeem Jackson, A.J. Halsey, in that secondary to kind of take over one of the cornerback, one of the safety roles. Those are guys that can step in as immediate contributors, starters right away for LSU. And then the big question, can Harold Perkins get back to previous levels? If Harold Perkins showcases his star potential again, this is a really scary LSU defensive unit. This is the year for LSU. Brian Kelly, you need to put it all together this year. You have one of the best rosters in the country. There's no excuses. You don't have to play Georgia. You don't have to play Texas. LSU, you have to show it this year. So with that, we're going to end our show for today. Thank you so much for tuning into the GSMC College Football Podcast, presented to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Please remember to subscribe, like, follow the channel, and if you want, you can also go to Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, or Twitter for even more sports content, more sports updates that you love. Thank you so much, and have a great day.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to